Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Asia.
Good morning.
It is so great to be here with everyone. The last time I was in a Creative Morning space alone was over a year ago, and it's a wonderful privilege to be here. So Ryan, thank you so much for having us come together every month and celebrating now 10 years with Creative Mornings. I'll introduce myself. My name is Nastassja Euliss, and I did my Creative Mornings talk April of 2023. And the topic was Moments to Movements, where we talked about the moments in my life that led to the movement that I now preside over, which is Therapy, which is a mental health organization that focuses on the mental health for flight attendants and aviators. And I'm sure everyone here has been on a plane. So my organization is directly affected by all of you who travel every single day. What am I up to these days? I have a 15-year-old, so that speaks for itself. Directly involved with the organization and just showing up for those who I love. And Asia, tell us a little bit about what's going on with you.
Okay, I have so much energy. I don't know what to tell y'all. My name is Azia Ellis-Singleton, and I am a whimsical photographer who was born and raised here in Indianapolis. I'm also a vlogger and a live streamer. So I have been attending Creative Mornings for almost 2 years, and I met Nas at her talk, which we'll talk about a little bit today. And I don't know, if you are into like community and compassion and fashion, you know, just like get in touch with me. Marketing director position for anyone who volunteers, think of me somewhere. But otherwise, I'm just getting ready for the holidays.
Sounds good to me. And as we can see, the fashion is fashioning today. She
Thank
told
you.
us to wear brown. So
Thank
we
you.
came in our finest brown.
Yes, excellent.
This
Very
morning,
excellent.
not afternoon. So, guys, we all have Netflix, YouTube, all of the nine. What are you binging these days?
Okay, thank you for asking me. I am watching Arcane. If anyone is familiar, it is, okay, period. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, I guess I
so
need to get
it's
into it.
based on a game called League of Legends, and it is beautifully done. You can't see my nails, but they are on theme for the show because that's how much I love it. It's beautifully animated. It has an excellent art style, and the storyline is not original, but it's well done. It's well done, yes.
So I guess I need to start that this weekend then.
And you do,
All
and
right.
you do, yeah, actually. So if you could be anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
So I am all about anything that involves peace. And Venice is peace. It's gorgeous. I need a glass of wine, some good food, and my Kindle. My Kindle has been a lot of places, and that would be a place that I would love to be. Probably not right now because I'm here with you guys, but maybe in a few months, you know, just go there and just have a nice moment alone. Solo travel, try it in 2025. It's amazing.
So you don't want me to come with you?
You can come, but probably not on that trip. But
Okay.
we can talk
All
about
right.
it.
Okay.
We can talk about
Okay.
it.
That's fine. That's fine.
But we'll talk off air. Let's not air our dirty laundry up here, all right?
Yes.
So, my Creative Mornings talk was a year ago, and now a year ago, Ryan has put us both together again to just gain that familiarity again in the moment that we shared. So if you, Ryan, take a look at this. She's probably gonna speak next year, so you guys make sure you're there. Give the folks a little bit of what you probably may talk about.
Oh, yeah. So if I had to talk about something, it's sensitive a little bit, but it would be about the extremity of our anger. And in this political climate, the state of the world, I know that tensions are high, but I was in the height of BLM. I was protesting. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't have it in me. I can't sacrifice any more of myself for this country, and it's hard. And if I have accepted that, I have to accept that there's maybe another way to be active, to start conversations. And for me, that is a commitment to conversation. It's the other extreme, which is extreme patience and extreme grace, and having an understanding that maybe all the facts aren't the way that I understand, because people seem to think that if they're right and someone else thinks that they're right, where do we bridge the gap? How do we say, okay, you're not right, I'm not right, or maybe we're both a little right? Where's the connection? And so that commitment to conversation would be really important to me.
Absolutely, and you know, I think we're coming out of a really rough time with the election that just passed, and there's been so many feelings of angst. And maybe this is just your now of, I am angry, so I'm gonna take a pause. And you never know, I may see you back on the front lines in 6 months. That's just how it works.
And you might, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
so,
know.
let's just stick a pin in it for now, but you just never know what 6 months from now will look like, so.
Yeah, you don't. And I think we'll have a lot to talk about, I think, 6 months from now. We will.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so switching gears a little bit, what are you most proud of?
I mean, you can say I'm proud of my son, I'm proud of my family, but about 7 years ago, I didn't think I would be sitting here talking to any of you. I no longer wanted to live. And starting therapy was the trajectory that brought me to this point. So every single day that I wake up, I'm really excited that I decided to say yes to continuing on, to living, to serving, to just existing, because I've realized now my life is purposeful, and all of us in this room are here for a given purpose. Some of us haven't found what that is yet, but the fact that I wake up daily saying yes, I am really, really proud of myself for that, because some days are harder than others. And I go to therapy once or twice a month. Shout out to therapy. Please go if you don't have a therapist. If you need a therapist, I have tons of resources for that, but therapy has been my godsend and my just reason to say yes every day. So yes, I'm gonna take up space in this moment and say I am proud of myself, because why I'm here, I'm able to do more for those who I love. So absolutely, that is my proudest moment, is showing up for me. And speaking of proud, we gather every single month in rooms like this, in events all across the city. How do you just prioritize connection and just gathering, but how do you connect after you've gathered?
Yes, this comes back to my commitment to conversation, because I think we need to burst our me bubble a little bit and think more about our we bubble, right? I know that it's hard because life is so exhausting and we have to do all these things. Do you know making decisions from the time that I wake up makes me angry? What do you mean I have to eat every day? And then I have to decide what I want to wear, and then I have to get out the house and talk to people. It's a lot, but reframing that to go, oh, I get to leave my house and connect with other people. I get to come here and have a fun time. That's important for me. So I think moving into our we bubble gives us a little more intention with the way that we are connecting and the way that we're thinking of each other.
Absolutely. And so yes, we're in a we bubble most of the time, but we network. But what do you do with the connections after you've left? Like, are we intentionally inviting them out? Are we inviting them into the spaces that we occupy? We know in the city there's events galore. And a lot of times I experience FOMO because I work out of state and come back and I miss a lot of things. But when we do come back, like, how do we take that connection and make it more personal? Because everybody in this room has a story. So once we've connected, what do you do with it after? Are we just, yeah, I met her, I know that she's the director of whatever, but is that it?
I don't know, to be honest. I value connection a lot, but I'm kind of the problem, because once we meet, I'm like, we're friends. And then everybody else is like, no, we're not. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? You don't want to come to my house and eat dinner? Like, I just value that connection, but it's because I see the good in everybody. And I think that's genuinely the way that, like, we just commit to those conversations. If I feel like, you haven't specifically raised your voice in anger at me, then I don't have a reason to think that you would do anything else towards me.
Right.
And that's important. But
Absolutely.
how do you connect with your community?
So aviation is my jam. I know it inside and out, and sometimes I tend to box myself because it's what I know. But in this season, I really want to come out of that box and find some similarities with those who I network with as we traverse this. But Indianapolis, I'm putting myself out there in this moment and saying, I'm available to serve in whatever capacity is necessary. And I literally just told our exchange president at the Urban League that it's time for me to just get out of the me box and now ask others, what do you need from me? Because I am of service and can be of service. Can be of service. I'm sorry, I forgot you guys back here. But yes, I can and I'm willing to be of service in this next year. I do have a busy 15-year-old that's turning 16 next month, so busy time, but our call to action for all of you is to think about the connections and the gatherings that you place yourself, and how do you plan to connect and take that connection to have an engine, for it to move, for it to affect the people that you come across.
Yeah, I think it's important that we, one, express and verbalize our needs, but also respect and accept someone's no. So even if you express your needs and say, hey, I would like to do this, it's also okay for someone to say, okay, but I don't want to do that.
Absolutely.
And that's hard for us. Some of us are sensitive to rejection, only children. And so, that may feel like really personal, but it's really not. It's just the fact that we're all kind of like living in our me bubble. So I don't see it as, a bad conflict. I see it as a way to provide an opportunity for me to help, to reach out, to connect,
Absolutely.
and make this city that feels so big and it is small also really, really close knit and special. I go somewhere and I always see people I know and I love it.
My name is Michael Kaufmann. I have a couple of different hats. I gave my talk on empathy. The title of my talk was How Punk Prepared Me for Down Syndrome. I have an 18-year-old son with Down syndrome and cognitive disability, among other things. And I also have a 21-year-old son who embodies punk in the newest version of it, which is the post-internet version. I've been managing a band called Sunlux for 17 years. I also manage a composer named Holland Andrews, and I work with CICF on expanding trails and connectivity. I also am consulting 16 Tech on public art and public realm. So, yeah.
Michael's busy.
Yeah.
And my name is Ericka Sanders, and I am the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Euliss. And we work to keep incarcerated dads connected with their kids, and we also provide engagement with their families and reentry as well. We look at our dads in a holistic way. So we do things untraditionally, I think, in this space. And my talk was in 2019. In the beginning of UESU, so much has changed since then. I've worked really, really hard to change those things, and my talk was about just being inclusive and how we work to be inclusive in the criminal justice space, specifically around incarcerated dads. I'm happy to be here.
So, Ericka, you do carry a lot in talking to you and the work that you do, in addition to having a family and caring for them, to really pour into this extra family that you have. How do you relax and recharge? How do you find that space for yourself?
Yeah, I've worked really hard to not carry the issues, the problems of the dads that we work with. And so I'm one of those parents, my husband and I are both one of those parents where we've never limited screen time, like for our kids, it's just whatever. And so that's literally how I recharge. I love to watch TV, specifically reruns. I probably watch Living Single every single day. I watch King of Queens every single night. And so that's really what I do, and laugh a lot, try to stay connected with my family, with my friends. That helps me recharge. And I'm also someone that God and I are super, super close, and so we do a lot of talking. So anytime I need to recharge, that's where I go.
Awesome.
What about you?
I like to zoom out, thinking about the world. If I'm getting overwhelmed, zooming out and realizing that, we've only been here for a blip of time. Mm-hmm. And I also love to think about the gut biome, the 5-pound gut biome we all carry around. That we have a whole universe inside of our stomach that is bigger and probably more aware than we are. So that helps a lot. That helps me recharge.
Okay.
I
think we all learned something. Okay, nice.
We could talk later about that.
Nice. What is something that people misunderstand about you?
That.
I wasn't gonna say it, so I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, I think real quick, I think people who think I'm normal don't realize how weird I am, and people who think I'm weird don't realize how normal I am.
Fair. Yeah. I was thinking about this question, and I think that what people might misunderstand about me is my passion. I'm a very passionate person, and it will show up in different ways depending on what I'm passionate about. So, like specifically within my work, I'm pissed off a lot. I am frustrated a lot, and it's because I'm so passionate about it. Jay-Z has a verse that's like 6 minutes long, and towards the end of the verse, he says, forgive me, it's just my passion talking. I feel like I do that a lot. Like, I'm sorry that I got amped up, or I kind of took it to the next level, or I kind of stayed on this hill because I'm so passionate about the things that I care about. I think sometimes people might misunderstand where that comes from.
Yeah, that's a good observation. What has been your most life-affirming mistake?
I thought about how truthful I was going to be on this question, because there's many.
You pretend to be truthful.
Pretend to be truthful. But I did want to be honest, and I thought, today's my birthday, by the way. Thank you. And I thought, what a great way to start my 44th birthday. Thank you. To share this, because I don't think I've ever really said this out loud, so I'm going to do it today. So my most life-affirming mistake is that I tried to go to college, many times. And life happened, and I didn't. And so I spent a very long time not being truthful about that. I spent a very long time feeling embarrassed by it. Back in, it's not like today where it's like, you don't have to go, kind of live your dream. And so I felt like that was what you were supposed to do, and it always just didn't work out. So I spent a lot of time being ashamed of that, because everyone around me went to college, and everyone around me had friends that they met in college. It's this whole thing. And so I think that because of how I carry myself, and especially the work that I do, that people assume that I did. And I never corrected it because I was embarrassed by it. But now I'm proud of myself for how I was able to figure out my life, and how I was able to probably what people probably got from their college experience, I just got in another way. And so really kind of understanding, my journey is my journey, and that it was nothing to be embarrassed about or to be ashamed about. And so now I sort of share it, because I would imagine I'm not the only person who feels that way. And so just sharing it out loud, so that if anybody ever, feels embarrassed or ashamed about things because of how people might perceive you, we're done being that way. So that's for me.
That's great.
You talked about, especially in your talk, and you mentioned earlier about your son with Down syndrome and your 21-year-old son. How does being a dad impact you?
Yeah, I think that's what I gave a whole talk about in a way, so it's hard to summarize. But I think when I was thinking about this question, and a different way of thinking about it for me, it was less about me being a dad, it's about me having sons, which is a little bit of a flip, right? And so I think about, it's less what I've learned in parenting, it's more what I've learned in having them around and seeing the world through their eyes, and then also seeing sort of the constraints and limitations that are put on them because of who they are or how they perceive the world. And so and then just watching, in the last couple of years since I gave my talk, I've learned a lot. A lot of how I had framed the way I viewed the world was through my son with Down syndrome, but lately I've been seeing the world more and more through my 21-year-old son, who had a really rough COVID, lost a friend due to I'm sorry.
It's fine.
So it does impact a lot,
Yeah.
I think what I see more and more is I see a generation that is processing so much trauma. And, there's the sort of false, we make fun of this idea of trauma casting or whatever the phrase is, but I mean, I just think about the degree of like what people have to process who are coming up in the age of constant barrage of this and in COVID and now what it feels like to me. I think about like another season of COVID is how I think about this next season. And the reason I think of it that way is because we survived that last one, we can survive this one. But yeah, I think deepening the empathy and seeing what my kids have to go through, realizing that we're all going through our own shit, right? And it's all, in many ways, all relative to our experience. And so we all carry a deep lament and burden, and how can we then, view each other knowing that we all have that, so.
I would imagine that your sons are able to show up in this world because of that. You know what I mean? Like what you give them just personally and in your heart enables them to leave the house and not really worry about, all the things. They get it from home.
Well, thanks. The other thing I see with them is resilience, which is something I think that if we can continue to come together and work through this together, the resiliency that will result is pretty profound.
It's
so,
powerful.
Yeah. I want to ask you, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead.
Yep.
So in your talk, you said something that really struck me because I found it to be incredibly symbolic. You said, you're talking about the corsages that you would get for the daughters, for the father-daughter dances, and you said real flowers are important. Mm-hmm. Can you unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, so it's a two-part. And so for everyone here, so one of the things that we do with UESU is that we do events inside the prisons where the kids get to come and hang out with their dads. It's a Saturday afternoon, it's 3 hours, and they're able to connect and touch and feel and laugh and all the things. And in the early days of UESU, we did father-daughter dance. And I had a florist do corsages, real flowers, really mattered a lot. And they mattered a lot because one time I was there, and it didn't occur to me, but the dads were like, it's been 5 years since I've smelled a flower, or it's been so long since I felt a real flower. And so that's part of that is just realizing that what we take for granted, what we're so used to, there's people who haven't ever done it or have never smelled a flower, and forgot what that smelled like. And then the other part to it is, I am someone, if you know me, you know how I feel about you. I am very clear. I say it often, and I like to let people know how I feel because I never want anyone to wonder if I love you. If I love you, you know exactly why. If you annoy me, you probably know exactly why, And so I'm just a person that I try to show up for people in a real way that I wish that people would show up for me. And so that's what real flowers means for me.
That's beautiful. Thank you for saying
Thank you.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. Is it my turn?
Oh, well, I want to ask you another question because I want to keep hearing from you. So, because related to that, if there's one thing that you could change about the criminal justice system, what would it be? And I realize that there is the implausible or the slightly out of reach, and then the immediate. So feel free or anywhere on that spectrum.
Yeah, we talked about this, and I said I'm going to limit this one because there's so much that I have a desire to change because I am in a unique position that I spend a lot of my time inside prisons. I spend a lot of my time, talking with people who are formerly incarcerated. And so, of course, we want to reform and you want to do all of the things. But here's my desire, is that when I watch the news or when I hear a story and, this kid, robbed, a bank, or this person was drinking and driving and they crashed a car and sadly someone was hurt, in that crash. My first thought goes to, man, I wonder what life is like. I wonder what is going on in their world that this was their reaction, or this is what what led them to this decision. I'm curious about what leads to incarceration, what leads people to doing that. And it's simply because when I work with our dads, I don't know what they do, what they've done. We have criteria, things of that nature, but other than that, I find those things out organically because I want to get to know who you are first. And once I find that out and I find out what they did, we're just able to communicate in a different level. And so what I would want to change is really for people to just think a little deeper about if they see things on the news or people make a decision that seems like, why would someone do that? Just consider like, what is their life? What's going on that leads to that? Yeah. And so I would just want to change maybe how people think, because to your point, changing the system is not going to happen in my lifetime.
I'm Sampson, Levingston, and I lead walking history tours in the greatest city in the world. And we'll get into that some more. But I'm sitting across from our amazing lady, Miss Braydee. And go ahead and let
Hi,
people
Sampson.
know who you are.
My name is Braydee Euliss. I am an independent curator and artist advocate in Indy. Yeah, I don't know. That's it.
No, that's great.
We'll get into it. Well, you came to my house.
Yes.
Or I run a gallery out of the front room of my home. It's called Companion. Thanks. And you came, and we talked for probably 30 minutes out of the gate, no prompts.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, 12 minutes will be interesting. But we talked a lot about things that are hard for both of us, which I really appreciate being able to have honest, vulnerable conversations about those things. And I am interested in hearing about what you do so much, what you have given up to be able to do the work you do now.
You know, the one thing that I feel like, when we were talking about this, is that I feel like sometimes you can go from work to home and you get that, like, you can separate what you do from who you are. But there is no separation for me. Like, who I am is what I do. And it's like, it's a constant thing. And so for me, I kind of give up that peace of mind that you may get when you step away from like, I'm always at work. I'm always on. Like, when you see me, whether I'm out, like, having a beer or whether I'm doing it, like, I'm always on. And I don't kind of sometimes feel like I get the luxury of just taking some time off, because, like, who I am is what people like. And I'm blessed for that, but at the same time, you know, there's not just like, go clock in, clock out. I don't clock out, you know. So maybe that's one of them. And but for you, Braydee, you know, as you're like all over, because I've seen you. I met you at Butter. When I met Braydee. She was explaining to me how Butter 2 was curated. And normally I don't like to. Just a quick story. I don't like to like waste my time talking to people who do not care, because I care so much that if I can tell you don't care, I'm wasting my time, because you're doing this shit for show and I'm doing it for real. And I knew walking around with Braydee, I'm like, wow, she cares unbelievably about what she is doing in this space. But with all that being said, as you're caring so much, what do you do to like get away and kind of, I don't know, get a little peace of mind?
I do curatorial work for other clients, but I also, running a gallery space and gathering space out of my home is one of the ways that I kind of get away. It's a space where I get to do the work that I want to do as slow as I want to do it, and without a lot of the other pressures that come with really big versions of that work. So weirdly, my home, even though it is still work, but I think I also really love solo travel, already came up today, and day trips to other cities in the Midwest, to go to other museums, galleries. St. Louis is one of my favorites, Detroit, so yeah.
I went to Cincinnati, day trip to the National Underground Railroad Museum, which is really cool. And I like that when I go outside of Indianapolis to a museum, I can just go look at the museum without like people trying to show me what, Like people in Indianapolis will be like, Sampson, you gotta come see our new black table. And then like, it's let me just walk around. If you don't have Black history here, it's okay. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I know how to walk around the museum.
This is a good question. I love this question. Something that people misunderstand about you.
I don't know, but I'm constantly trying to figure out who I am and who we are in Indiana, like, and it's a constant thing. I think I don't know if people realize, but like when you go on a walk and talk or you listen to me speak, we're talking about history, talking about Indiana, but we're also like, it's very selfish. Like I'm very selfish in what I do. I tell people stories about my life every day. It's about me. I'm trying to figure out who I am. When you're on this tour, you're listening to me how I discovered who I was. And you can use the same process that I did, but like, I feel like it as much as it is, you know, education of things, it is me. And I think sometimes I feel like I get away with it. Like, wow, I just talked for 3 hours about myself and got paid a lot of money to do it. What the hell? But yeah, we're talking about, it's so personal because it is me. And that's why I guard it and share it in the ways that I do. Yeah, I'm gonna ask the same thing to you, Braydee. What don't people understand?
I hate that this is gonna seem like I'm just copying Ericka's answer from the last conversation, but exactly what you described about sort of the first chance that we really spent time together. I am really fortunate to do work that I am deeply passionate about and fiercely protective of. And it is hard to not be too intense sometimes. I have high standards for that work, and I have high standards for the work that other people do when they are sort of tasked with and being paid to work with and for artists. And I think that is, it's just really easy to mistake that passion for anger or something more personal when it really is just about wanting the best for artists and their artwork. That's working on it all the time. I have not done a Creative Mornings talk, but you have. You spoke virtually in 2022 about history, obviously, and I'm sure that not a lot about your perspective on what you shared has changed, but if there have been evolutions in the past couple years, what are some of those?
Yeah, the first Creative Mornings I did, I remember I talked with Ryan about it, and I was like, I don't want to do February because it's Black History Month, and that's great, but I talk about this shit every day, so we don't got to just do it in that month. Let's go January. And so, because I wanted to go. And I was talking virtually, so Fred was helping me, like, pre-film some stuff, and I'm, like, walking around the Hunley's house. Good to see you guys over here. I'm walking around the Hunley's house, screaming at this camera, like, looking at a camera in the face. I couldn't see anybody, and I feed off energy. I feed off of people. And so I wanted people who were watching that virtual presentation to see how excited I was to talk about history through a camera. I'm just looking at the camera, and I watch that back, and I look at myself, and the things that I talked about my grandfather in Mount Vernon, Indiana. My parents are over here. My mom's from Mount Vernon. My dad's from Virginia.
Hi.
I love my parents. And no, I'm glad they came. They said, "Do you have a ticket?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're just come on." Yeah, I'm in it. Like, but anyways, I feel like I've learned so much about myself from that moment. And I look back on things that I say, and I'm not always, but I'm glad I said it. And like at the time, I always think like, you know, am I too fired up or am I too passionate here? But I always watch that, I'm like, I said that because I believed it, and I still do. Like, even as we talk about the correlations of now, and you know, I talked about this great migration of black people up in Indianapolis and how everybody got all spooked out about that, got all scared, started separating people in schools and parks just because new people were here. Now you fast forward 100 years and you're seeing the same things happen in Indiana towns. New people are coming up here. They want to be in Indiana. They want to be Hoosiers. They want to love this state that I love. And people are scared. And people are passing out KKK flyers. to try to intimidate people for trying to be nice. And it's not most of Logansport. It's a small, loud people, right? A small group of people that's very loud. And I've seen this happen before in Indianapolis. I look at history every day. So I'm not gonna act like this is new or it comes from nowhere. And I think when I watch those videos, I'm like, I watch that old talk, I like what I said, and whenever I watch this one, I think I'll like what I said too. Okay, for Braydee, let's see what we got here, because we're not gonna hit all these questions. All right, like, how do you stay motivated though? Because we talked about arts and we talked about Indiana, and I'm gonna kind of skip ahead. We talked about like your love for Muncie, and you told me, and like I almost teared up when you said it. I wrote it in my last note in my phone. I made another one last night, but it was last note on my phone. It said, "Someone has to stay." Like, why do you feel that way, and how do you stay motivated to do arts work in East Central Indiana?
Yeah, so born and raised in Muncie. The plan was not to stay, but I did go to Ball State. I studied sculpture. And the plan was absolutely not to stay after school. And then the gallery that I was working at asked if I wanted to be the manager, if I wanted to manage the gallery, who else was gonna let me do that, so I'll stay. Then I met a dude, and so, I don't know at what point I started kind of putting the pieces together in a different way, but I was bumping into seeing a lot of activity in the arts and culture space in Muncie, but not for people my age and not for people making work that wasn't watercolors of barns and oil paintings of turtles. And so I just started recognizing places where I wished that someone before me had done something, and then sort of took it upon myself to try to do that thing, to broker opportunities for artists, to help them in places where no one else was helping them. I learned a lot at the gallery that I was working at, that undergrad and most grad programs don't teach you about how to make your work in the real world. And I wanted to share that. And I've been really lucky that has been well received by people in Muncie and in Indy.
That's great.
Yeah. I want to know what you're learning about right now.
What I'm learning about right now, I'm looking at these questions. I'm gonna try to answer 5 in one sentence. So one thing I'm learning about right now is the Mason architecture. We have the Scottish Rite Cathedral, the Mirage, just independent studies. That's how I know all this shit. Nobody sat down and told me these things that I talk about. I just wanted to know them so I can know myself. You know me, everyone in this room, you know me because I know me. And I'm still trying to figure that out. And I like the Mirage, the architecture there. I was at the tour of the Scottish Rite. As a kid, my favorite movie, 2 favorite movies as a kid, Holes, and think about the history, how it goes back and forth, and how knowing history matters to break the curse. And National Treasure 1 and 2, right? And think about that, like they're going all over the place trying to find the treasure, and they can only find it because they know history. And I learned all this stuff about I went to this talk on the Masons, and they're talking about like the Knights Templar. And I was like, I know about this from National Treasure. But now I'm like learning about this stuff that I didn't know why I liked it as a kid, and now I get to kind of figure out who I am by just, I don't know, following the things that I'm interested in. And then I guess we can kind of wrap this up soon, but I got a good question for you. Yeah. What are you most excited about in 2025?
So I mentioned I have a gallery in my home. It's called Companion. It launched it in fall of 21, and have maybe done 10 or 12 different projects at different scales, solo shows, group shows. And this year has been kind of quiet publicly because I've been trying to figure out what the next phase of that project can look like. And so, yeah, that's what I'm excited about for 2025.
Let's go. Yeah, make sure you go check it out. And Maples and Fall Creek, the gallery is cool space over there.
Always a pleasure, Sampson.
Yeah,
Are we closing it?
Yeah, do you
Yeah.
want another? Do you think about your legacy, Braydee?
No. That's my question to you, because
Okay.
you have a real answer for it.
Well, I do think about it because I think about what I do, man. I look up people who do cool shit, and I'm inspired by them. When like times of turmoil are happening, I'm looking up like, did the Lilly family say anything about this, or like, who said something? Because how is this going on? How is this overt racism and sexism happening? Did anybody say anything? And I look at the newspaper and I go read columns and articles from people who gave a damn, right? Like Muhammad Ali speaking out against the Vietnam War. They're disproportionately sending black people over there to just go die for something that we don't even know why we're over there. He said, I'm not going. And took all that backlash from that. Those are people I'm inspired by, people who said something. And so I think like if I get a platform and I don't say anything, I'm everything that I hate about people in powerful positions. So yeah, I think about my legacy just because like I'm inspired by people who left a legacy for me to look at. So hopefully I can leave one for other people.
Hello, everybody. My name is Graham. I spoke at Creative Mornings in November of 2016, which was the first Creative Mornings after Trump was elected the first time. And I spoke at the first Creative Mornings after COVID lockdown. So I come in when things are going great.
Happy times. Happy times. Good morning. My name is Jenny Boyts. I use she, her pronouns. I spoke at the Creative Mornings in March of 23, so almost a year ago. At the time, I was the president of Indy Pride and was spending a lot of time at the White House. Not the White House, my God. The State House, talking a lot about just the ways in which so much of the violent rhetoric that was coming out of the State House was really affecting families and real people. And so, yeah, a lot of what connects Graham and I is, you all heard, happy times, and being asked to kind of step into a conversation when there's some uncertainty.
Let's break some ice. What
do
is
it.
one song that I should listen to today?
Yeah, I was like trying to hype myself up this morning with a few of them, and I think you and everyone should listen to "Feed the Babies" by Gary Clark Jr.
Okay.
What about you?
I will say I recently rediscovered a mid-2000s alternative song called New Low by the band Middle Class Rut.
Okay.
And it sounds cool. It's a cool sounding song, which is all that matters. But it's also about finding yourself in a worse position than you've ever been, which is a perfect transition to talk about the state of the world.
It's true. I think Graham and I wanted to just start and with a bit of acknowledgement. So I think we spoke about, I spoke a little bit about the thread that connects us in both of our talks. I think also acknowledging that what we talk about today is also really kind of in the midst of quite a bit of uncertainty. And how just acknowledging, we knew that was going to happen, that our whiteness in this conversation actually gives us a unique privilege to talk about this kind of as openly as we are, and more importantly, like gives us a unique perspective. And at least the perspective I'm bringing to this is also to talk to the white folks in the room. And so excited to kind of bring that, but also want to make sure we're rooting us in the reality of that truth.
Yeah.
In that way.
You and I got together earlier this week and basically just settled on like we want to talk about the state of things, and we arrived at the common ground that both of us are people who feel like things are bad and they're gonna get worse. We are cynical in the sense of how we see the big picture right now, and we are relatively distraught. So I wanted to ask you what scares you right now? Like we both know we will make it through administrations, but there is a much bigger conversation. And what is it that is scaring you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I think and believe is that we're about to see probably one of the biggest mental health crises of our time. And so, if we're acknowledging and we're being honest about that truth and that reality, to me it also is then asking, we have to be honest about a couple things, and specifically from kind of the white, body that I sit in. My fear is that we're just not going to be honest with ourselves about both the ways in which we kind of have perpetuated and or created the conditions that got us here, even if we didn't vote for him in this instance. I'm scared that we're not going to be honest about the ways in which we also now have a responsibility as white folks to kind of care for the immense amount of suffering that's going to happen. I'm scared that that dishonesty with ourselves is going to make, allow us to just pass the responsibility on and put our heads down. And that's really scary to me. I think in this thread of kind of honesty, I'm also really scared about, us not being honest with each other or with our own communities. And so, I think there's, when we don't do that, we're not really kind of preparing each other for what's to come, right? And I deeply believe that there will be a lot of suffering to come. And so when we're not eyes wide open, it means we're just not prepared. And what does that mean when we're to be prepared? And quite frankly, I mean this in all seriousness. I spoke about this in March of 2023, mostly because we were talking about, and we at Indy Pride at the time, we were talking about what is the training, what does actual practical support look like for communities? And what that meant was we were doing Stop the Bleed training for all the gay bars in the city and along Mass Ave, and making sure that they were prepared, and that how do we kind of build the confidence and reduce the anxiety? And I think that's true for all of us in this room now of, practically saying if we're being honest with each other, then it means we're being prepared. And so it's therefore not alarmist to say we should all be doing gunshot wound training, right? If we're being honest, we should all be thinking about who are the top 3 people that I'm gonna call when things get dark. And if we're being honest, then we're also asking the person across from us, who are we, how are you genuinely, and who are your top 3 that you're gonna call when things get hard? What's making you nervous and scared nowadays?
In thinking about a mental health crisis, you have, your work with Indy Pride and you have a lot of experience in these things that I think will attack people's rights and bodies and safety, and I think those come from a very specific place, the people in power pushing long-standing hateful agendas. I own a business, and when I think about the current people in power, the thing that just glares is how much everything is going to be for profit. And you can do a lot of things for profit very incompetently as well. There's a lot of room in the private sector to just do things poorly. So what happens when, just the examples of what if we don't have a national postal service? And for a lot of people, what is the difference between UPS and the Postal Service? What is the difference? And the difference is that the Postal Service is a public good, so that it has to deliver to remote rural areas when it's not profitable. UPS doesn't have to do that. That is the Postal Service does suck in a lot of ways compared to UPS. That's because they're running a public good. And that is not a given at all. Nobody will soon care who runs these departments. They're being put in place by business people, and business people are friends with business people. What do we do when IPS doesn't have enough money? Free lunches are gone. We're in a time when everyone in this room sponsors a kid and we pay for their lunch because free lunches are gone. And then IPS says, we're announcing an innovative partnership, and our schools will now be run just by a private company that runs schools all over the place. And the CEO is who makes the decisions now. And we know that CEO, and he's not good. And will we, what energy will we have to call forth to do so? I don't know how any of those systems work. I don't know anything about any of that. And even if we did, will we just be too tired when it happens? And what do we say to people who just had kids? Sorry, school is shitty now. So those things will happen. I think the reason he got elected wasn't racism or misogyny or a lot of these things. I think it was the art of the deal. A ton of people respect this gross for-profit mentality. And they're about to be a ton of them in power. So that is scary. We are scared people. But we are also not people who give up at all on the humans around us. We are people who have continued to do work often. So what is the hopeful flip side? What is the other constant, which is the light in the darkness?
Yeah. I think, what is true and how I'm thinking about this question is in a little bit of a push of what you just described, which is my response would be there's hope in the reality, and again, in the spirit of honesty, that if we're being honest with each other, especially as white folks, that this overt, real, racist, misogynistic, overtly oppressive kind of systems that have been created are affecting and have affected for generations individual people and structural systems, the way you just said. So if we're being honest, then we know that this has happened for a long time. And so there's some hope in this kind of idea of that there's this strength or this resiliency that's come before us. It's not new. I think the twist and the push that I want to give to folks in the room is that is true, and also as white folks, we're feeling so scared because we haven't seen it or felt it, or our privilege hasn't always been as overtly threatened the way that it will be going forward. Even in my queerness, I still have and carry some privilege and power in my white body. And so, there's the reality that we could learn a lot so long as we are honoring and giving credit to so many different communities. And I guess I want to be really specific here, more specifically like Black femmes, and more specifically like Indigenous people who have consistently created culture and community in spite of this kind of overt systemic and individual racism and systems of oppression that have kind of continued to hold folks down. And so if we are honoring that, learning from, giving credit to, and actually now saying like, okay, we hear you, we see this, and now we're gonna carry some of this load or some of that burden, I think there's hope in that. Because to me, I think that's also saying like, I deeply believe that if you don't know the nature of fear, you don't know how to be fearless. Right? And so if we are now like in this state of fear, my hope is that it pushes us to this fearlessness to say like, let me learn and try new things. Let me take care of my people in a different way. And let me protect not only my own community and my own folks, but also like, how am I protecting, how can I be fearless and stepping outside of that and saying, I can say these things maybe safely, by leveraging these ways, but also just really zooming in and saying like, that fearlessness also allows me to take care of the people around me, and allows me to kind of just be really, again, kind of honest about the fact that we do still have a choice in some of this. And I think what I think about often is that, life has always been kind of this both and I talk about this a lot, but that it's both really dark and also really light. It can be all in the same breath in the same moment. And so the choice in that is just really how do we respond to it? And so if we're honoring and learning kind of from what, who's come before us, what's the choice that we're now making to create joy? And I now also, I lead a company and sit in a seat that literally is to create joy, right? Like we do live music and own a couple of venues in the city. And so not only is it now my job, but I think it's just this reminder that like waking up every day and saying like, if we're learning and respecting and honoring and carrying the load, especially as white folks, then I'm also being, putting myself in a position to give, have a choice in creating joy. And I think, I think that gives me a little bit of hope at the end of the day. Sometimes not, but what about you?
I think the easiest example for what is hopeful is that this is going on, that we reached 10 years of doing this. And quickly, the only reason I think this is something to be celebrated is that it doesn't make money. It's never made any money. No one's ever done their Creative Mornings thing and it slowly morphed into a pitch for their business. Like that's not how the approach is done. And this is not a place to platform the successful people of the city. And I think it can be intimidating being in the audience and looking at people like us and being like, those people are really established. But what Michael said was true, that every single person here has completely the same legitimate amount of insight and story. as anyone who's ever spoken here does. And that is that is like a real reminder that I would want to give to people, that there is no barrier. Like, this is real. This is like the safe space. It does not matter what you look like here. Nobody fucking cares what you look like here. And that's not true everywhere. And this is a safe space to say, I don't know what, you used a term and I don't know what that means. Like, no one is judging you here for not being caught up in the ways that we talk. And everyone is just equal. Ryan doesn't pick people to do this who are different. Ryan picks the people that he knows who are the same as everyone in the audience, and who have retained their humanness and have retained something that is just worth sharing and is universal. So this is hopeful. Like, people do this kind of gathering when on the other side of that wall is a war zone. Like a war zone. This is a human thing. This is not like, this didn't start with TED Talks. Like, this is what humans do, is to have an hour and a half of peace and tranquility and connectedness when outside is a war zone. And we won't get to a war zone, but it will get bad out there. So to everyone who came, thank you. It is like important to keep being here. It is important when people ask you, what do you do in Indy, to say this. A lot of us are like, maybe you've gotten to the age where you're like, do I have friends anymore? Do I really have friends? Like, and you're asking, like, are we friends? This is real. Not every creative talk space is safe. I'm vouching for this space because I've been here since the first one, and this won't be corrupted because it doesn't make any money, and it's run by people who are comfortable staying servants, and that will keep it legit. So 10 years.